Let's continue on with the Klonoa series with Klonoa 2, Lunatea's Veil. This is another game I've always heard amazing things about, but never quite got to try. Surely it can't be as expensive as the first game. Oh, what the fuck? Seems like this game has also gotten a scalper treatment in recent years. You know, considering that the first game got advertising like this in the US. But Susan, I have Klonoa. Baby, I want Klonoa. I'm kinda not shocked that this series is so obscure. I guess it's just another reason to try out the Phantasy Reverie Series remakes. I honestly wasn't able to find much information on the development history for this game. I wasn't even able to find any interviews with the developers from when the game was new. Such is the fate of an obscure PS2 game, I suppose. Indeed, this game is very obscure. It reviewed well upon release, but sales-wise it was a complete flop, being the 85th best-selling game in Japan during its release. Ouch. However, I feel like this game has gotten more love over time from fans and creators online. Has it earned this love? Let's take a look. Also, full spoiler warning for this game. Klonoa 2 continues the Klonoa series tradition of being super adorable and fun and lighthearted, right up until the ending hours when it decides to dropkick you directly in the balls. Summoned yet again to a new world, Klonoa finds himself in the land of Lunatea, a land with kingdoms named after emotions. Accompanied by the clumsy but lovable priestess Lolo and her weird dog puppet thing named Popka, Klonoa sets out to ring the 4 giant bells of Lunatea in order to acquire the various elements before the villainous Liarina, also owner of the most Chad-like strut known to man, can beat him to it. Klonoa 2's story follows much of the same formula as the previous game when it comes to how it tells its story. The first half of our adventure is a pretty straightforward adventure story, while the second half is backloaded with far more character development and plot. After reaching the Maze of Memories, our first big emotional moment is revealed. The cute, sweet, and adorable Lolo turns out to have major emotional baggage. During her training to become a priestess, she was bullied and called weak by the other priestesses. As it turns out, part of the reason Lolo wanted to go on this adventure was because by virtue of tagging along with Klonoa, she would be promoted to the title of priestess. This event sets up the themes that the rest of the game tackles, being those of sorrow. The real gut punch, of course, comes during the final level, as you would expect. Liarina manages to steal the elements from us, and in so doing awakens the last kingdom that Lunatea hid away, the Kingdom of Sorrow. The King of Sorrow summoned Klonoa to Lunatea after he saw his kingdom fall to ruin when Lunatea isolated it away from the other kingdoms, choosing to forget sorrow in favor of the other emotions. After facing the king in battle, Klonoa rings the final bell and brings the emotion of sorrow back to Lunatea, vowing that no one will run away anymore. After a heartfelt goodbye with Popka and Lolo, Klonoa returns to his world, thus ending Klonoa 2, Lunatea's Veil. Klonoa 2's story is quite a bit more mature and engaging than the first game. It tackles themes of emotion and sorrow in a way that really surprised me when you consider the target audience. You can tell that the developers had a message in mind that they wanted to tell, and I'd say that they succeeded. However, I do feel that they could have gone a bit further with how they depict these themes. They didn't need to completely crush your soul like the first game did, but as I mentioned earlier, these themes are backloaded into the last few hours of the game and aren't given much time to breathe or gain much depth. Everything is very surface level with how it's depicted. Still, I did find myself crying at the end of the game, so the developers were certainly doing something right. While its story may not have been perfect in my eyes, Klonoa 2's characters almost are. A big upgrade from the first game is that a lot of our main characters receive some form of development, especially starting with Klonoa. Klonoa was about 9 years old in the first game, and he's about 12 in this game, according to the developers. We can clearly see the effects of this in his personality. He's overall kinder, smarter, and less emotional than the first game. While in the first game, he has a freak out and cries during his departure at the end of the game, in Lunatea's Veil, he simply sheds a single tear and walks away with his dignity. He's also okay with stealing, so that's interesting. Lolo is probably my favorite character of the game. She's an incredibly interesting character who is deeply flawed, and I found her journey to be really compelling. Her backstory also resonated with me as someone who's had similar experiences in life. Bullying is a real problem, and I find it commendable that this game tackles the effects of it in its story. However, just like the first game, I can't extend my praise too far to the villains. Both Liarina and the King of Sorrow have a similar problem, a lack of screen time to flesh out their motivations. I understand that this is, at the end of the day, a game meant for kids, so it doesn't need to be the greatest written thing known to man. However, I still feel that because Klonoa tries to shoot for deeper themes, it's worth talking about its writing in these terms. Liarina is, for most of the game, just a generic bad guy who tries to gather the elements before we can. When we do learn her backstory, it's honestly pretty weak. She used to be a priestess and grew impatient with the process, leading her to become a sky pirate in order to achieve the power of the gods. In a way, this makes her a dark parallel to Lolo, someone who also failed in the past to becoming a priestess. But this part of the story isn't really explored at all, and I just found it to be rather weak. The King of Sorrow, however, is hit the hardest by the lack of screen time. He shows up in the last 15 minutes of the game, wherein his entire character is dumped on us in one fell swoop. His character is captivating, that's for sure. The king of a fallen kingdom, abandoned by the rest of the world. He sought to save his kingdom by summoning Klonoa in order to gather the elements and ring the bells. However, we don't get to see him for very long, and we don't learn much about him. A lot of his character comes from what is implied about him and his past, instead of being shown to us. This can be interesting in its own way, but I just wish that more time was given to these characters in order to flesh them out. Overall, I really liked the characters of Klonoa 2. I just wish that they were given a little bit more time to breathe and be fleshed out, considering that this game tries its hardest to tackle some pretty heavy themes. What I truly cannot criticize about Klonoa 2 is its aesthetic and atmosphere. This is a beautiful game with a fantastic soundtrack. God, let's talk about that first, because this soundtrack blows the first game out of the water in my eyes. The first game already had a pretty fantastic soundtrack, that much can't be disputed. However, this game has such a wider variety in the sounds on offer that I just find myself wanting to listen to it far more than the first game. You've got your whimsical sounds, similar to the first game, but you've also got stuff like the jazz of Volk City that just makes me want to get up and dance, the trippy melodiousness that is the Maze of Memories, and surprise, early 2000s butt rock? However, probably the most striking track of the game is that of the Kingdom of Sorrow, Huponia. The emotions that this track manages to convey without any words are honestly pretty incredible. This song incorporates some of the music from the first game, showing that perhaps the Kingdom of Sorrow is reminding Klonoa of his own sorrow from long ago. This, combined with the visuals of the level it takes place in, makes for a super depressing and incredibly memorable final level. Speaking of the visuals, those are an interesting topic to discuss, because the remake that we're playing for this review has a completely different style to the original game. The original PS2 version of Klonoa 2 had a completely cel-shaded style to it that the remake eschews in favor of a more traditional 3D style. I don't really know how to feel about this. I love the cel-shading aesthetic, so to see it be completely thrown out for something that's arguably more generic is honestly a little disheartening. However, the remake doesn't get rid of everything that made Klonoa 2 a fantastic looking game. Compared to the first game, Klonoa 2 has a much larger scale that really allows its graphics to pop. The levels in this game really feel like huge locations. This, combined with the fantastic use of varied camera angles throughout the game, really provide a sense of scope to make this game feel like a massive and beautiful adventure. Additionally, the game ran incredibly smoothly for me, and I didn't run into any slowdown or graphical glitches. Above all, though, I feel that Klonoa 2's gameplay is where this game really takes the first game, kicks it out the window and into fucking orbit, because this is a massive improvement over what the first game set up gameplay-wise. The basics of the gameplay are still the same. Klonoa can run, jump, and inflate enemies using the wind ring. He can then throw enemies as a weapon, or use them as a double jump that can be chained with other enemies. How these basic abilities are used, however, is where the game destroys the first game. First of all, the challenge level has been increased quite a bit. I wouldn't call this a hard game by any means, but it did come pretty close to getting a game over multiple times, which is certainly an improvement over the first game. Secondly, this game fixes one major flaw from the first game. The first game had a problem of being overly simplistic until the ending levels. This game fixes that problem by having a lot more creativity in the level design and how Klonoa is able to utilize his very simple abilities. You can jump on trampolines that launch you high into the sky, get fired out of cannons into different planes of the level, and inflate enemies in order to combine them with other enemies to solve puzzles. There are plenty of new enemy types too, like an enemy that can rocket you into the sky, or enemies that turn you into a ball of electricity that can destroy boxes in your way. This makes Klonoa 2 significantly more engaging for me than the first game ever was. I didn't want to put the game down because I was just having so much fun playing it. Level designs in particular are far more inventive and unique than the first game. This game will see you traveling across beautiful tropical islands, majestic lost arks, and trippy as hell funhouse mazes that honestly gave me a headache the first time around. Plus, Klonoa goes to fucking war in this game. That's just hardcore. This level diversity really surprised me and made every new level a treat. One of the most interesting new gameplay elements is the addition of snowboarding levels. Think something like the Sand Mountain level from SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, but with slipperier controls, and there's a couple more of them. I thought these levels were perfectly fun, but they're honestly not very groundbreaking or interesting past the first playthrough. It's basically just the same gameplay as usual, but auto-scrolling. They did give us that amazing singing Klonoa song from earlier though, so I have to give them credit for that. Finally, I would say that Klonoa 2 is the perfect length for a 2D platformer. My playthrough clocked in at about 5 hours compared to the 3.5 of the first game. This was right before my fatigue started to set in, so I really appreciated the perfect length. Overall, I loved Klonoa 2 Lunatea's Veil. It takes all of the great things from the first game and expands upon them while adding plenty of new elements of its own. The story, graphics, and music are all phenomenal as well, perhaps even better than the first game. This game was an absolute treat to play through for this review, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who's interested. Please, please, please support the Klonoa series by purchasing the Phantasy Reverie Series release. It's only $40. We need a Klonoa 3. Come on, Bandai Namco! Thank you all for watching this newest episode of Supervillain Reviews. If you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing for more awesome content. Stay wicked, minions!